Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So we got a bit of a surprise, and I wasn't really paying that much attention to the tournament that was coming up soon. I knew it was Spider's Den, I knew it had Barbarians or accessories being offered, but I didn't notice until this morning that it was actually Barbarians only. So that is going to be the topic for today, the surprise, to me at least, challenge tournament going on right now that does feature some of a little bit of prism crystals or prism fragments for the summon pool going on right now. But we'll talk about that in a later video about why that's probably not worth your time. But today's focus is this niche challenge spider tournament that honestly was a little bit tougher than I originally thought in order to come up with a concept for a team. But you can see that I've been running it. So I did end up coming with a couple of teams that I'm going to show you guys. But yeah, the normal spiel here, there's no void shard up for grabs in this case on the rewards here on the right. You do have a chance to go out there to get the prism fragments, which could get you basically one summon in the summon pool. Again, spoiler alert, I don't think it's really worth it for this particular iteration of the summon pool, but we'll save that for a different video. As I always say, check your groups to see if it's relatively non-competitive, because you might be able to snag first place or, top 4 spots and get yourself some 6-star relentless gear. On top of the standard rewards, of course, there is also some of the Titan points up for grabs, up to 80 from this tournament. So I definitely recommend, if you're going for the Feyhammer Titan event, that you probably should participate in this tournament. And let's talk about the best stage to farm. So as always, when it comes to these challenge tournaments, I highly recommend that you focus your efforts onto normal mode, just because it is substantially easier to do, especially when you're restricted to a couple of factions, or in this case, one faction in particular. So we're going to focus our efforts on normal mode. Granted, if you come up with the hard mode team, feel free to do it on your own, but we're going to be focusing on normal mode. So stage 25 offers you the best gear quality. Stage 20 offers you the most efficient stage in terms of points per energy. And then of course, stage 16 is much easier to do. Typically it's void affinity, but for Spider it is spirit affinity, and you still maintain your chance to get 6-star gear. But most importantly, it's just easier to do, and you have to worry a little bit less about the mechanics of whichever boss you're focusing on. So as I mentioned, I do have a couple of teams to showcase for you guys, and this is going to be the stage 16 version, which is more or less just bringing in as many DPS as possible. So if you Carl in there, because he can turn meter control the boss, which is handy for preventing the boss from taking a turn, but also he has an AoE freeze, which doesn't really matter because it's strong enough to kill the spiderlings on this team. Notice we don't have an AoE decrease defense because we just have an onslaught of AoEs, and that's more than enough to keep killing the spiderlings. Oscarul, one of the best epic defense-based nukers in the game, has a big AoE that's, again, it can stun, but in this case, he's just another AoE champion who can kill the waves. Shield Guard, same thing. He's an uncommon, but he has an AoE ability on a 2-turn cooldown that boosts his turn meter when he crits, and so he basically gets an instant turn once he hits all the spiderlings, so he loops back around to that ability very quickly. And then Ferric the Fat, ally attack, just to improve their damage on the boss itself, not focusing solely just on the AoEs. And then Berserker, again, another AoE champion. He has a double hitter AoE in his kit, but yeah, he's just a rare that I have built for Doontower Hard Secret Rooms. Again, AoE damage, and so he's just kind of thrown in there. So realistically, the only champion in this team who's really doing anything relative to the boss is Yukarl, who's stealing the turn meter on the A2, but everyone else is just whoever you have that can nuke and do damage, and obviously is a good affinity for the stage. So let's go ahead and see this team in action. It's pretty simple, as you might suspect. Again, Yukarl is in there just to make sure that the main spider never gets a turn, but other than that, we're basically just hitting all of the spiderlings with a bunch of AoE damage. Now, again, because we don't have a debuffer on the team, AoE decreased defense, I could run War Maiden, but most of the time she just weak hits, so she doesn't actually land it, and so I might as well just not run one. It's kind of the mindset I came up with. But I think like an Armina, if you happen to have her build, can definitely work because she is a good affinity for the stage. But at the same time, as you can see here, we're going to be killing the spiderlings so often that they're not going to have decreased defense on for the most part, just because they're going to be dying and respawning, as we can kind of see here. But yeah, so Yukarl, you can obviously get him from the clan shop eventually. You might not have him yet, but you will get him eventually. But he is S tier, perfect for this stage in terms of the champion who can solely control the spider's turn meter. And of course, because this is below stage 21, when we actually reduce her turn meter, it is the full effect. And so when he steals it, she's basically back to 0, and she's never going to get a turn, more or less. So yeah, we don't really have to worry about the spiderlings killing people, just because again, it's a much lower stage that's a lot easier. But even if they do happen to get some turns, it's not going to be the end of the world, and eventually we'll loop back around to someone's AoE and they'll just kill the spiderlings before they can really get anything going. So it's not the fastest run in the world. It does take a lot of time, but primarily that's just the respawn animations of all the spiderlings. But we don't really have a method of keeping them alive and saving the animation time. We don't really have a choice, and that's kind of how you would typically do stage 16 anyways. If you're kind of coming up in the early game, you just throw an onslaught of AoE champions at it with a debuffer, and you're basically good to go. So Farrakhan the Fat, I guess also should mention that he does have decreased defense on the A1, so whenever he gets a chance to do that, he hopefully places it on the boss, and we can do a little bit more damage. Pretty slow run compared to how you would normally try to run Spider, but again, with the restrictions of having to only use Barbarians, this is kind of what I can come up with for stage 16. But it is pretty much the strategy for stage 16 where you just throw an onslaught of AoE champions at it, maybe with a little bit of turn meter control. It's not that important because if you're constantly killing the Spiderlings, then even if she does get a turn, she's not going to heal a massive amount because the Spiderlings are dead most of the time. So you can kind of pick and choose about running your Carl or not, or running turn meter control at all. You can just run a bunch of AoE champions. You're basically good to go. The more advanced team I have to show you is for stage 25. So your Carl's in there doing the exact same job. We're bringing in Tuhanarok in my case, which is just some sort of support, some sort of healer. This could be like a Sky Touch Shaman or someone else who can do some healing. Woad Painted is a good candidate as well. We have Syl the Drakes, good old Syl the Drakes coming in there for the AoE stun. So we're introducing more control onto the Spiderlings. And then obviously we can revive if anyone is dead. Farrakhan the Fat is primarily in there to provide the ally attacks to help Syl go in with the A1s and reduce the turn meter of the boss, just to help Yakarl, who can do it for the most part on his own, but now that we are doing stage 25 or any stage above 21, the turn meter reduction effects are reduced by half, so it's a little bit harder for him to kind of keep control of the spider's turn meter, the boss spider's turn meter on his lonesome. And then the MVP of this run, who is completely unascended, and I just slapped some gear on him just to hit the accuracy and speed requirements, is Elder Skarg, who's going to be our AoE HP burn champion. So let's go ahead and see this team in action as well. And this is, of course, the team that I will be running for the duration of this tournament. So when it comes to Elder Skarg's ability, he is unbooked. I will note that immediately. All you have to do is have 3 debuffs on the primary target, which in this case is going to be the boss. And then for some strange reason, he just gets AoE HP burn and True Fear. So he does a little bit of control, but more importantly for this fight, he just places AoE HP burn, 3-turn cooldown, unbooked completely. So no books required. All you have to do is make sure that you have 3 debuffs on the main Spiderling. So he is our primary source of damage. We're introducing a little bit of control with Syl the Drake, so she's going to stun them whenever she can. She is in a stun set. We'll go over the builds on the champions after the runs here. And notice that I'm not using Yakarl's freeze ability here, just because on my account, Yakarl is built for damage. And so he would kill the Spiderlings, or at least kill them faster. And so we don't really want that. We want them to stay alive so they can keep ticking with the HP burns as much as possible. So when it comes to the affinity matchup, in this case, even though Elder Skarg is literally the weakest link of the team, they're targeting Farrakhan the Fat because he is negative affinity, so that is kind of a bonus as far as this thing. Otherwise, they would target Elder Skarg and kill him immediately. But honestly, once he places the HP burn once or twice, in this case twice, he's basically done his job and doesn't really need to stay alive. But again, they'll just focus on the affinity. But yeah, you can see there, turn meter control is pretty much controlled by Yakarl, and then every once in a while, Syl will get a little bit of turn meter drop on her A1 as well, and that's part of the reason that Farrakhan the Fat is in this particular composition, but also just trying to help get more debuffs at the start of the fight, just in case. He's negative affinity, so he doesn't always land it, but it does kind of help, just in case 3% resist on Tuhanarok, as well as Syl the Drakes and or Yakarl placing decreased speed. So once again, not the fastest run in the world, but it's serviceable enough for this 3-day tournament, so this is the team that I'm going to be running, and I basically consider this to be mission accomplished. As promised, let's take a look at the builds on these champions for the sake of transparency. When it comes to these challenge tournaments, I do like to mention the fact that I don't necessarily always build champions fresh for these. In this case, I did for Elder Skarg, but for the most part, everyone else had the gear that they had on for whatever content they're already being used in, or they have the gear that I put on them in a previous iteration of some other form of a challenge tournament. So jumping into the build, starting off from the bottom with Shieldguard, the uncommon partial star of the AoE DPS team, we have him in a lifesteal and an immortal set. This is primarily because I was trying to make sure that he can heal himself in the Cursidius Intranos, one of the stages, and so I just put him in lifesteal because I don't really use lifesteal that much on any of my other important champions. So total stats are as follows: 32,000 on the HP, 3,500 on the defense. Of course, he is a defense-basive nuker-ish champion. 207 on speed, full crit rate, 223 on the crit damage, and just under 200 on the accuracy. He doesn't really need much accuracy because he only places like the weak version of decreased speed, and it's not really that essential. He's really just built for damage. Uncommons cannot have blessings, so we can skip that fact. And then masteries, I did a little bit just to give him a little bit more defense, and then a little bit of the crit rate, crit damage from the offense tree. But for the most part, I'm not going to fully master an uncommon that I use in a very, very niche situations. Next up, we have Berserker, who I mentioned I do use in Doom Tower secret rooms, hard secret rooms to be exact. So he is in a stun set with Immortal just to heal himself up a little bit. And then his total stats are as follows: 33,000 on the HP, 4K on the attack, just under 200 on the speed, full crit rate once again, and then 201% on the crit damage. Don't really care about his accuracy or resistance. And for the blessing, he is built to do some damage. So Phantom Touch, he is rare. You don't have that many options, but you know, a little more damage doesn't hurt. And again, clearing the secret rooms. And then masteries, as you might guess, give him the crit rate buff, and then didn't really do much more because he's a super niche rare that I don't need to max out. Next up, we have Hoskarul, who is built in a very budget Savage set with perception for a little bit of accuracy as well. His total stats are as follows: 39,000 on the HP, 4K on the defense, 221 on the speed, full crit rate, 207 on the crit damage, and then 264 on the accuracy, which is a little bit on the low side, but he does, like I said, he's in a budget Savage gear, so he doesn't have the best accuracy stats. So ideally, he'd be somewhere closer or past 300 for the Cursed City, just in case I happen to need him there. For the blessing, I opted for Cruelty because he does have a big AoE attack, and so he just helps to lower their defense a little bit. And then for the masteries, because I did used to use him in Tomb Tower hard, like one of my auto teams, just kind of using him as wave control or wave damage as well as wave control. But offense tree coming down, picking up a little bit of the extra damaging masteries, notably Opportunist because he does have a stun in his kit, and then ending on Helm Smasher to complement the Savage set. And then the defense tree because I pretty much built enough accuracy in his kit, at least in its first iteration of the build. Now it's a little bit lacking, but notably coming down to Harvest Despair to get the leech whenever he does place the stun, and then Retribution counterattack. He does have a chance to stun on the A1 as well. Next up, we have the star of the show for stage 25, who is literally in the most slapped together sets possible. But we have a double accuracy, or double accuracy with the accuracy and perception set, because I just needed him to get to 200, and he's not ascended, so I don't have access to the banner. He's not, or the amulet, and he's not 6-star, so I don't have access to the banner. So just enough, a little bit of damage, but more importantly, enough accuracy to actually land the AoE HP burn. So stats are going to be super low because he is still 5-star and unascended. So 31,000 on the HP. Basically, you could ignore the attack and defense. Speed just enough, 187, 100% crit rate, 137 on the crit damage, super low. Again, the gloves aren't even maxed out. Threw this gear on him this morning. And then 225, the most important stat on the accuracy, just to make sure he can actually land the AoE HP burn. Coincidentally, I did happen to get a duplicate of him yesterday, which is kind of interesting that he happened to come in handy. But this is the first copy that I had already sitting in the vault at 50. So came in useful, but we'll see. Maybe eventually I'll 6-star him and whatnot, but like I did mention, he's completely unbooked. Don't have to worry about that. This ability does not require any books to cool down the effect of it, so it's a 3-turn cooldown regardless. And of course, no masteries because he doesn't need them. This is the first time I've ever used him on my account, and he does exactly what I needed to do as such. Next up, we have Farrakhan the Fat, who is in a reflex set and perception. His total stats are as follows: 43,000 on the HP, 3K on the attack, 3,200 on the defense, 261 on the speed, so fairly quick but nothing crazy. Full crit rate on the gloves notably, and then 123 on the crit damage, so nothing crazy there either, but just enough to help him do a little bit of extra damage. And then 358 on the accuracy. Originally this was high enough because I was using him as one of my ally attackers in Hard Mode Fire Knight. He's since been replaced by Lady Mikage, who is arguably better, and so he's just kind of in like a budget reflex gear for now. For the blessing, I did go with Phantom Touch again with Fire Knight hard in mind. Whenever he was joining in on other people's ally attacks, there was a chance to get an extra pip onto the shield. And then the mastery is unfinished because I knew I was eventually going to replace him with Lady Mikage, so I knew it didn't really matter to go all the way down to War Master for a champion on the team who's going to be replaced. So a little bit of extra crit rate, a little bit of accuracy, and that's basically where I stopped on him. Syl of the Drakes, resurrected from the vault, who's been in this gear set for the longest time. I know a lot of people like to run her in Relentless, but I've always had a thing for her in the stun set just to double up on the stun chances to make it a lot more likely for it to land, and matched with a little bit of perception gear. So her total stats are as follows: 53,000 on the HP, 3K on the defense, 227 on the speed, and then 317 on the accuracy, so enough to land the stuns across multiple things including the Cursed City. Amazingly enough, I've not gotten a soul for her, so I do not have a blessing, and I honestly haven't put any thought into what it would be. And of course she is mastered because she used to be a staple control of my account many years ago. And so we have the defense and support tree obviously coming down to Fearsome Presence to increase the chance of her landing her stun, but also the stun set landing its stun, and then mixing in with the support tree. She is a reviver, so we wanted to get Spirit Haste. Sniper increases the chance of landing decrease speed on the A1, and then just a little, standard-ish debuffer masteries here on the support tree. The second star of the show is Jakar the Scourge, at least for turn meter control star of the show, but he's also built for my Dark Fae team. That's why he's in a reflex set with Perception. So his total stats are as follows: 40,000 on the HP, 5k almost on the attack, 215 on the speed, full crit rate, and 223 on the crit damage with 365 on the actually, again, built for Dark Fae Doom Tower Hard. He does have a blessing. I just put Brimstone on him just because he is primarily a PvE champion. So if he can land that on whatever boss he's trying to kill, then whenever they take a turn, use an active skill, they can take a little bit of damage. And he is mastered because he is on a core team, farming that lethal gear in the Dark Fae. So offense tree is a little bit weird because they were kind of going a little bit of nuking, a little bit of PvE damage with War Master. So it's kind of a mix, a hybrid style. And then support tree, mostly the standard debuffer masteries, although we're skipping out on Arcane Celerity, just because typically he's designed to turn meter suppress whoever he's targeting, and so ideally they're not really taking turns, so the decreased speed shouldn't really wear off, right? At least that was my way of thinking about it. And then lastly, we have Tuhanarak, who honestly is not really integral to the team, but it's a little bit of healing, a little bit of cleansing, and most importantly, it was a couple of debuffs to land on the boss so we can actually activate Elder Skarg. So she is in triple perception. This is my Hydra Clan boss build, as we'll see with the stats. So 64,000 on the HP, 3,500-ish on the defense, 267 on the speed, so pretty quick, 446 on the resistance, so she is one of my Head of Mischief tanks with the continuous heal she places on herself with the A1, but also the blessing that we'll see in a second, and then 367 on the accuracy, enough to be able to land her debuffs against all the way up to Nightmare difficulty of Hydra Clan boss. And the blessing that I chose is Lightning Cage for now, just because again she is one of the Mischief tanks alongside Wallmaster Otharion, so this helps her get targeted with an extra buff. And then for the masteries, it's a decent mix of stuff. Standard debuffer on the offense tree coming down the left hand side, ultimately ending on War Master. Support tree, it's a mix of a lot of things. I basically indexed into as much turn meter as I could by getting a rapid response as well as Arcane Celerity, but also getting a little bit of the healing masteries because that does boost the effect of the continuous heals. And then of course I wanted the Lasting Gifts and Master Hexer split because she does a good amount of buffing and debuffing in her kit. So when it comes to substitution, there's not that many champions to talk about because of course this is a single faction tournament, but nonetheless we'll go through some of the honorable mentions that are there to mention. So starting off with the first category, which is HP burn, specifically AoE HP burn, you have, if you're lucky enough, Alaz the Sunbearer or whatever, who does have on Form 2 the ability to place AoE HP burn here. Obviously it will activate it on champions under Stone Skin, which won't apply in this case, but nonetheless it is AoE HP burn. For those fortunate enough to have them, I recommend that if you have friends, like I do not, then you could use Chronum as well. He does have AoE HP burn on this ability, but keep in mind that if you build him for damage, he might end up killing the spiderlings over time, so you might want to trade a little bit of damage just to make sure that he actually keeps them alive by also and just maintaining the fact that they're under AoE HP burn. And then of course Elder Skarg, who we showcased in on my team, who just has the ability, as long as you have enough debuffs on the main spider, you can place AoE HP burn as well. And then I don't necessarily recommend this strategy as perfect, but technically speaking, if you have a single target HP burn champion like Jotun, for example, who has it on the A2 here, there you go, single target HP burn, you can spread it with the likes of Tuhanarak if you happen to have her, but more importantly, or more accessible for most people, if Harken Greatblade. So technically you can also run a single target HP burn champion and debuff spread it with this ability here, and then it might spread HP burn depending on how many debuffs you placed. If you only place HP burn, that's going to spread that one. So that's an alternative way to get AoE HP burn. If you are going to be running a DPS strategy, you might want to think about having a debuffer. Again, I skipped it for stage 16 just because it wasn't really sensible, but you might be a little different, or you might find it really hard to kill the spiderlings with AoE, so decreased defense will most certainly help you do that. So you can run Jetney the Giant, who has AoE decreased defense, previous fusion champion. If you happen to have Ursula Warcaller, she can also do it AoE decreased defense, but also a lot tankier, but most people probably don't have that. Armina can work for the epic category, AoE decreased defense, 3-turn cooldown, and then of course War Maiden can most certainly work AoE decreased defense on a 3-turn cooldown. So between Jetney, Armina, and War Maiden, you're basically basically have 3 ladies who can do AoE decrease defense. So pick whoever you'd like. I think Armina could be probably the best in slot relative to stage 25 and I think stage 20, just based on affinities, but also she has the chance to have a little bit of CC when the turn meters are depleted. So you can kind of work around that to get a little bit of extra control from her and her kit. And then for the supports, this is kind of a mix of like healers, revivers, and turn meter control. Obviously, Silda Drakes is who we featured on my team. Armand's, if you really just want to lock down the spiderlings and the boss, he can kind of do it on his own, as we've seen in the past, but keep in mind that if you're running him with AoE HP burn abilities, then the spiderlings are never going to get turned, so that's not going to work. So that's got a little bit of a counter synergy. So he's more for the teams where you're trying to just control the spider, or control everyone, and then kill them with AoE attacks or single target attacks, or however you want to deal with it. Freya, if you happen to have her, good cleanse, good heal, or a good cleanse and a good shield with increased defense, so she can protect the team. Same thing with Valkyrie, if you happen to have her, she can protect the team. Granted, counterattacks will massively slow down your runs because there are a lot of spiderlings and they take a lot of animation time to attack individually, and then obviously the counterattacks. Contra the Cyclone could be interesting if you want to place a bunch of debuffs, particularly to activate your Elder Skarg if you happen to have him. And then, we featured Jakar. MVP is in terms of single target turn meter control. To Hanorok, of course, debuff spread, but also she can be your healer, cleanser type ability, keep your team alive, increase speed, increase defense, help them running a bit faster. For the epic category, Haikatune, of course, the quintessential speed, booster, turn meter control a little bit, decrease speed, so she can kind of do it all, keep your team running faster. Ferric and the Fat, we kind of showcase ally attack is helpful for more damage onto the boss, and then a little bit of debuffing if you want to take advantage of the fact that he has HP burn and poisons. Oscarul, of course, more of a nuker, but nonetheless mentioning him because he does have AoE stun, so he can be your control champion if you want to run him that way. And then if we come down to the rares, super honorable mention to Soulbound Boyer, because she does have this ability here that's kind of like Cold Heart's ability, but minus the enemy max HP, but it does fully deplete the target's turn meter. So once again, if you don't have Jakar yet from the clan shop and you have this rare lying around, you can slap Sigur on her even at level 50, and she can do the job of controlling the main spider's turn meter, and it's on a 4-turn cooldown, but it's, you can book it with rare books, which should be a lot more accessible to a majority of people. So there you have it. This is going to be my team performing this spider tournament featuring the Barbarians only. I do plan to stop at 2050 in the tournament wherever the Titan event points end, because I'm not interested in this particular iteration of the summon pool. So I'm just going to min-max a little bit there and not have to go a little bit further. And then I'll switch over to, I think, the Odin's Trial tournament, which is coming up starting tomorrow, at least at the time of this recording. So I'll be switching over to that once that goes live. Let me know in the comment section down below what team you came up with for your account and what stage you're going to be running it on. Hopefully you did get an easy group and you can snag yourself some of that sweet, sweet relentless gear. And as always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.